The sun beat down mercilessly on Xavier's weathered face as he rode through the Colorado wilderness in the summer of 1882, searching for strays from his cattle herd, when he spotted something unusual near a dried creek bed. A woman in a tattered blue dress, kneeling in the dust, clutching a wilted rose in her trembling hands. He pulled his horse to a stop, dust rising around the mare's hooves. The woman didn't look up, even as his shadow fell across her. Her hair, dark as a raven's wing, hung loose around her shoulders, tangled with bits of dry grass. Her dress, though torn and stained, had once been fine quality, the kind of thing a respectable woman from back east might wear. "Madam," Isaac called out, his voice rough from days on the trail. "You all right?" She lifted her face slowly, and he saw tear tracks cutting through the dust on her cheeks. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and haunted, set in a face that must have been beautiful before whatever hardship had brought her to this desolate place. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24, he guessed, though suffering had carved lines around her mouth. She held up the wilted rose, its petals brown and curling. "Beauty can bloom again, right?" Her voice cracked on the last word, desperate and broken. Isaac dismounted, moving slowly so as not to startle her. He was 26, tall and lean from years of working cattle, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water. He'd seen plenty of hardship in his years, but something about this woman's question struck deep into his chest. "Yes, madam," he said quietly, crouching down a few feet away from her. "I believe it can." She laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "You're lying to be kind. Everything beautiful dies out here." "What's your name?" he asked gently. She stared at the rose for a long moment. Sarah Gallagher. "I'm Xavier. My ranch is about 5 miles west of here. How'd you come to be out here alone?" Sarah's hands tightened around the rose stem, and he saw blood well up where a thorn pierced her palm. She didn't seem to notice. "The wagon train left me. Said I was bringing bad luck after my husband died of fever. They gave me some water and rode on 3 days ago." Anger flared in Isaac's chest. He'd heard of such things happening, people turning cruel when fear took hold, but it never failed to sicken him. "That's murder, plain and simple. Maybe I deserved it." Her voice was hollow. "James gave me this rose the day we married, back in St. Louis. Pressed it in my Bible to keep it. He said our love would last forever, beautiful and unchanging as this flower. But flowers die, Mr. Xavier, and so did he. And so will I suppose." Isaac pulled his canteen from his belt and held it out to her. "Not today, you won't. Drink." She looked at the canteen as if she'd forgotten what water was, then took it with shaking hands and drank deeply. When she lowered it, some color had returned to her face. "How long since you ate?" Isaac asked. 2 days, I think. Maybe 3. He pulled some jerky from his saddlebag and handed it to her. She ate slowly at first, then more quickly, and he made himself look away to give her some dignity. The sun was starting its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Miss Gallagher, I can't leave you out here. Will you let me take you to my ranch? My housekeeper, Rosa, will see you're looked after proper. No obligations, no expectations. Just a safe place until you figure out what you want to do next." Sarah looked up at him, searching his face for deception. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "Because it's the right thing to do," Isaac said simply. "And because nobody deserves to die alone in the dust, holding on to dead things." She flinched at his words, looking down at the wilted rose. "It's all I have left of him." "Then we'll keep it safe," Isaac said. "Rosa's good with plants. Maybe she can teach you how to grow new roses, living ones." "I don't know if I remember how to tend living things," Sarah whispered. "Then you'll learn," Isaac said, standing and offering his hand. "If you're willing." For a long moment, she just stared at his outstretched hand. Then, slowly, she reached up and took it. Her hand was small in his, the skin rough and blistered from days under the harsh sun. He helped her to her feet and she swayed, weak from hunger and thirst. Without thinking, he steadied her with an arm around her waist. "Easy now," he said. "My horse can carry us both. It's not far." She nodded, too exhausted to argue. He helped her up into the saddle, then swung up behind her. She sat stiffly at first, but as they started moving, she leaned back against his chest, her body finally giving in to its exhaustion. Isaac kept one arm around her waist to keep her steady, the other holding the reins. The ride back to the ranch took over an hour. The sun had nearly set by the time the buildings came into view. A sturdy house built of logs and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals holding horses and cattle. It wasn't the biggest spread in Colorado, but Isaac had built it himself over the past 5 years, and he was proud of it. Rosa Martinez came out onto the porch as they rode up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a stout woman in her 50s, with silver streaking through her black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Isaac Xavier, what have you brought home now?" she called out, but her voice was warm. First it was that 3-legged dog, then the orphaned calf, now a woman. "She needs help, Rosa," Isaac said, dismounting and reaching up to help Sarah down. She could barely stand, her legs shaking. "Found her out by Dead Creek, left behind by her wagon train." Rosa's expression shifted from amusement to fury in an instant. "Bastards," she muttered, then crossed herself quickly. "Sorry, Lord, but you know it's true. Come here, child. Let's get you inside and cleaned up." She took Sarah's arm with surprising gentleness, supporting her weight as they climbed the porch steps. Sarah still clutched the wilted rose in her free hand. "I'll see to the horse," Isaac called after them. "Make sure she eats something light, Rosa. She hasn't had food in days." Rosa waved a hand in acknowledgement, already guiding Sarah through the front door. Isaac watched them go, an unfamiliar feeling settling in his chest. He'd brought home injured animals before, nursed them back to health, but this felt different. The way Sarah had looked at him with those storm-gray eyes, asking if beauty could bloom again, had touched something in him he'd thought long dead. He'd lost his own parents to cholera when he was 19, had watched his younger sister die the same way just months later. After that, he'd thrown himself into building this ranch, keeping himself too busy to feel much of anything. He'd had a sweetheart once, a girl named Margaret who'd promised to wait for him while he established himself. But after 3 years, she'd married a banker from Denver instead, tired of waiting for a struggling rancher. That had been 2 years ago, and Isaac had told himself he was fine alone. But something about Sarah's question echoed in his mind as he unsaddled his horse and rubbed the animal down. Beauty can bloom again, right? She'd been asking about more than just a flower, he knew. She'd been asking if anything good could grow from the ashes of loss and betrayal. He found himself hoping he could show her the answer was yes. Inside, Rosa had settled Sarah in the spare bedroom, helped her wash with warm water and soft cloths, and dressed her in one of Rosa's own nightgowns. She'd fed her broth and bread, just enough to ease the hunger without making her sick. Now Sarah lay in a real bed for the first time in months, clean and warm, the wilted rose resting on the table beside her. Rosa returned to the kitchen where Isaac sat nursing a cup of coffee, still dusty from the trail. "She's sleeping," Rosa reported, sitting down across from him with her own cup. "Poor thing's half-starved and sunburned bad. Her feet are blistered something awful. Been walking for days, I'd say." "Her husband died on the trail," Isaac said quietly. "Fever." The wagon train blamed her for bad luck. Rosa made a disgusted sound. Superstitious fools. Fear makes people cruel. She studied Isaac's face in the lamplight. You got that look again. What look? The one where you're planning to fix something broken. Like with that dog that got caught in the coyote trap or that horse the Johnson boys mistreated. You get all determined and stubborn. I'm not trying to fix her, Rosa, just helping someone in need. Rosa didn't sound convinced. She's not a lost animal, Isaac. She's a grieving widow. That's complicated. I know that, do you? Because you got a good heart, but you don't always think things through when something needs saving. Isaac set down his cup. What would you have me do? Leave her out there to die? Of course not. You did right bringing her here. I'm just saying be careful. With your heart and hers. She's been through something terrible, lost her husband, been abandoned by people she trusted. She's going to be fragile for a while. I understand, Isaac said. I'll keep my distance. Just want to help her get back on her feet, that's all. Rosa patted his hand. I know you do, Mijo. That's what worries me. Your help has a way of turning into something more. Sarah woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned. The cowboy who'd found her, his kindness, the older woman who'd tended her like a mother. She sat up slowly, her body aching from days of hardship but feeling more rested than she had in months. The wilted rose sat on the bedside table, brown and brittle. She picked it up carefully, remembering James giving it to her on their wedding day. He'd been so handsome in his new suit, his eyes bright with dreams of their future out west. They were going to buy land, build a farm, raise a family. Instead, he'd gotten sick 2 months into the journey, burning with fever, his skin hot as a stove. She'd tried everything, bathed him with cool water, forced medicine down his throat, prayed until her voice gave out. Nothing had worked. He died calling for his mother, not even seeming to know Sarah anymore. The other families on the wagon train had grown fearful. Some said she must have done something to anger God to bring such misfortune. When 2 more people got sick, they'd blamed her, said she carried bad luck like a disease. The wagon master had been apologetic but firm. She had to leave. They'd given her a canteen of water and some hardtack and left her by the creek. She'd expected to die. Part of her had wanted to. But some stubborn core of her refused to just lie down and surrender. She'd walked, searching for water for any sign of civilization. And she'd carried that rose, the last piece of the life she'd thought she'd have. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Miss Gallagher, are you awake? Rosa's voice, kind but practical. Yes, madam. Rosa entered with a bundle of clothes. These were meant for Isaac's sister before she passed. Never got worn, they should fit you well enough. Breakfast is ready when you are. Sarah took the clothes with trembling hands. Thank you. For everything. I don't know how I'll repay you. No need for talk of repayment. You just focus on getting your strength back. Rosa's eyes fell on the wilted rose. That's special to you. It was from my husband, our wedding day. Rosa nodded slowly. My husband gave me a rose too when we married. Bright red, beautiful. He's been gone 15 years now. I don't have the rose anymore, but I've got the rose garden he planted for me. Every summer they bloom and I remember him. The love doesn't die, child. It just changes form. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know if I can survive losing him. You already are surviving, Rosa said gently. That's the hard part. Now you just have to decide what kind of life you're going to build from here. Get dressed and come eat. Can't make decisions on an empty stomach. After Rosa left, Sarah dressed slowly in the simple calico dress and undergarments. They fit reasonably well, though she'd lost enough weight that the waist hung loose. She braided her hair back as best she could without a mirror, then made her way down the hall toward the sound of voices. The kitchen was large and sunny, with windows overlooking a vegetable garden. Isaac sat at a wooden table, already eating, his dark hair still damp from washing. He stood when she entered, his movements awkward as if he wasn't sure of the protocol. "Miss Gallagher, you're looking better." She was suddenly conscious of her appearance, of how she must look even cleaned up. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Xavier. I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything. Sit, please. Rosa's made enough to feed the whole territory." Rosa snorted from the stove. "He's not wrong. I always cook too much. Sit, child, eat." Sarah sat and found a plate heaped with bacon, eggs, fried potatoes, and fresh biscuits placed before her. The smell alone made her dizzy. She ate slowly, aware of both of them watching her with concern. "What are your plans?" Isaac asked after a while. "Do you have family back east you want to return to?" Sarah shook her head. "No. My parents died when I was 16. James was all I had. We were going to Sacramento, going to start fresh there." "You could still go," Rosa suggested. "We could help you get on a stage when you're well enough." The thought of facing a new city alone, of trying to make a life with no money and no skills beyond basic housekeeping, made Sarah's chest tighten with panic. But what choice did she have? "I suppose that's what I should do," she said quietly. Isaac was quiet for a moment, pushing eggs around his plate. "Or you could stay here for a while. We could use help around the ranch. Rosa's got more work than she can manage, what with cooking and tending the garden and helping with the accounts. If you wanted to work in exchange for room and board until you figure out your next step." Rosa gave Isaac a long look, but then nodded. "It's true. This place is too much for one old woman, and Isaac's useless with anything that doesn't involve cattle or horses." "I can cook and clean," Sarah said slowly, "and I can read and write. I help James with correspondence back home." "See, useful skills," Isaac said, and Sarah caught something in his voice, an eagerness he was trying to hide. "No pressure, of course, but the offer stands." Sarah looked between them, these two kind strangers who'd saved her life, and were now offering her a purpose when she'd thought she had none left. Part of her wanted to refuse out of pride, to insist she could manage on her own. But a wiser part knew she'd never survive alone. Not yet. "I'd like that," she said softly. "If you're certain I wouldn't be a burden." "Burden," Rosa laughed. "Child, you'll be working harder than you ever have. This ranch doesn't run itself, but you'll earn your keep honest, and nobody here will judge you or blame you for things beyond your control." Isaac met her eyes across the table. "You're safe here, Miss Gallagher, for as long as you need." Something in his steady gaze made Sarah's throat tighten with emotion. She'd been certain, kneeling in that dust with her wilted rose, that nothing good would ever touch her life again. Yet here were these people, offering her kindness without expecting anything in return. "Thank you," she whispered. "And please call me Sarah." "Only if you call me Isaac," he replied, and the small smile he gave her was warm enough to thaw something frozen inside her chest. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that Sarah found both strange and comforting. She helped Rosa with the cooking and cleaning, learned to tend the vegetable garden and the small flock of chickens. Her hands, soft from city life, grew calloused and strong. The sun burned her skin darker despite the bonnet Rosa insisted she wear. She learned to bake bread and churn butter, to mend clothes and put up preserves. Isaac was often out working the cattle, but when he came in for meals, he was unfailingly polite and kind. He asked her opinion on things, listened when she spoke, treated her like a person rather than a burden or a servant. Slowly, Sarah found herself looking forward to these meals, to the sound of his voice and the rare smiles that softened his weathered face. Rosa noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "You're growing fond of him," Rosa said one afternoon as they worked in the garden together, pulling weeds from between the bean plants. Sarah felt her face heat. "He's been very kind, he has. But that's not what I mean, and you know it." Sarah sat back on her heels, staring at the dirt under her fingernails. "I was married for 5 years, Rosa. James has been dead less than 3 months. What kind of woman would I be if I was already thinking about another man? A human one," Rosa said gently. "Grief isn't a straight line, child. It twists and turns. Sometimes you feel guilty for laughing. Sometimes you feel angry at the one who died for leaving you. Sometimes you notice that someone else has kind eyes and a good heart, and you feel guilty for noticing. It feels like a betrayal," Sarah admitted quietly. "James would want you to be happy. Any man worth loving would want that. But I still love him. I still miss him every day." "Of course you do. And maybe you always will in some way, but that doesn't mean there's no room in your heart for something new. Hearts are strange that way. They stretch to hold more than we think possible." Sarah pulled at a stubborn weed, her vision blurring with tears. "What if I'm broken? What if I can't ever feel that way about someone again?" "Then you can't," Rosa said simply. "But you won't know unless you give yourself permission to try. And Isaac, he's a good man, patient. He's been hurt too, lost people he loved. He wouldn't rush you or expect more than you can give." "Has he said something to you about me?" Rosa smiled. "He doesn't have to. I see how he looks at you when he thinks you're not watching. Like you're something precious and fragile that might break if he breathes wrong." Sarah thought about this as she worked, her hands moving automatically through the familiar motions. Was it possible to bloom again after being torn up by the roots? Could something new and good grow from the ashes of everything she'd lost? That evening, after supper, Isaac asked if she'd like to walk with him to see the sunset. Rosa made an excuse about dishes that needed washing and shooed them out the door before Sarah could think too hard about it. They walked in comfortable silence past the corrals, where horses nickered softly in the cooling air, and up a small rise that overlooked the ranch. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and deep purple. "I used to come up here when I first started building this place," Isaac said. "When everything seemed impossible and I was sure I'd fail. Something about watching the sunset reminded me that each day ends good or bad and another one comes. Gave me hope, I guess." "It's beautiful," Sarah said softly. "It is." But when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the sunset. She felt her breath catch. "Isaac, I'm sorry," he said quickly, looking away. "I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. It's just, having you here these past weeks, it's reminded me that this place is more than just work and obligations. It's reminded me what it feels like to care about something beyond cattle and land." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. "I care about you too," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "But I'm afraid of what it means, of moving too fast, of forgetting James." "You won't forget him," Isaac said gently. "I haven't forgotten the people I've lost. They're part of me, shaped me into who I am. But they wouldn't want me to stop living." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not asking you to forget your husband, Sarah. I'm not even asking you to feel anything specific for me. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to see where this goes. No rushing, no pressure. Just two people who have both known loss, trying to find something good again." Sarah looked up at him, this man who'd saved her life, who'd given her purpose and safety and kindness. His eyes were steady and honest, full of patient hope. She thought of Rosa's words, "Beauty can bloom again." "Perhaps it already was. I'd like that," she whispered. Isaac smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. Yes, though I can't promise I won't be difficult. I'm still sorting through a lot." "That's all right. I'm patient, and I'm not afraid of difficult." He held out his hand, and after a moment she took it. They stood there on the rise, hands clasped, watching the last of the sun sink behind the mountains. It wasn't a grand declaration or a passionate embrace, but it felt like a beginning. Like a tiny seed planted in scorched earth, tentative but alive. The summer turned to autumn, and the ranch kept them all busy. Isaac and his hired hands brought the cattle down from the high pastures. Sarah helped Rosa preserve the last of the garden harvest, filling the cellar with jars of tomatoes and beans and pickles. The nights grew cool, requiring quilts and warm fires. Isaac had been true to his word about taking things slow. He didn't push for more than Sarah could give, but he found small ways to show his care. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow. He taught her to ride his gentlest horse, patient as she learned to control the animal. He sat with her on the porch in the evenings, talking about his dreams for the ranch, asking about her childhood in St. Louis, sharing stories of his own family. Sarah found herself healing in ways she hadn't expected. The sharp edge of grief dulled to a bittersweet ache. She could think of James now without feeling like she was drowning. She could laugh at Isaac's dry humor without immediately feeling guilty. She could imagine a future that held more than just survival. One cool October evening, Isaac knocked on her bedroom door and asked her to come outside. Curious, she followed him into the darkness, guided by lamplight, until they reached the back of the house where the old vegetable garden lay mostly bare now, preparing for winter. But in one corner, illuminated by the lamp Isaac hung on a post, was something new. A small rose garden, freshly planted, the bushes still small but healthy, their roots covered with mulch for protection against the coming cold. "They won't bloom until spring," Isaac said, watching her face carefully. "But Rosa helped me choose hardy varieties. They should survive the winter just fine and come back strong. I thought maybe it would be nice to have roses again, living ones like I promised." Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of grief. They were something else, something warm and overwhelming. "You did this for me." "I did. Seemed like it was time to plant something beautiful, something that will bloom again come spring." He stepped closer, his voice soft. "Like you're blooming again, Sarah. I see it every day. You're coming back to life." She turned to him, hardly able to see through her tears. "I never thought I would. The day you found me, I'd given up. I thought everything beautiful in my life was over." "It's not over," Isaac said, reaching up to gently wipe away her tears with his thumb. "It's just beginning. If you want it to be." "I do," Sarah said, and realized she meant it with her whole heart. "Isaac, I do want that, want this, want you." He cupped her face in his rough, calloused hands. "I love you, Sarah Gallagher. I know it might be too soon to say it, but I've never been good at hiding what I feel. You can take all the time you need to feel it back or not feel it at all, but I needed you to know." "It's not too soon," Sarah said, covering his hands with her own. "Because I love you too. I didn't think I could, didn't think I had room in my heart after losing James. But Rosa was right. Hearts stretch. And mine has stretched to hold this, hold you, without diminishing what I felt before." Isaac leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her gently. It was sweet and careful, a question and an answer all at once. Sarah kissed him back and felt something inside her finally, truly begin to heal. When they pulled apart, both a little breathless, Isaac laughed. "Been wanting to do that for weeks now. I'm glad you did." They stood together in the lamplight, looking at the sleeping rose garden. "Next spring," Sarah said, "when these bloom, will you marry me?" Isaac blinked in surprise, then grinned. Thought the man was supposed to ask. "Well, I'm not a traditional woman anymore. Hardship burned that out of me. I'm asking you, Isaac Xavier, will you marry me when these roses bloom?" "Yes," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Yes, absolutely yes." Rosa found them still standing there an hour later, wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly about the future. She smiled to herself and went back inside without disturbing them. Some things were worth waiting for, and these two had both waited long enough for happiness. Winter came hard that year, with snow piling high against the buildings and winds that howled down from the mountains. Sarah and Isaac spent the long evenings by the fire, making plans. They'd marry in the spring in the garden when the roses bloomed. It would be a simple ceremony, just Rosa and a few of Isaac's friends from neighboring ranches, but it would be theirs. Sarah wrote letters to distant cousins she'd lost touch with, sharing her news. Some didn't respond, but a few did, expressing happiness that she'd found love again. One cousin sent money as a wedding gift, which Sarah carefully saved. On Christmas Eve, Isaac gave her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain. When she opened it, she found 2 empty spaces for pictures. "I thought you could put a picture of James in one side," Isaac said quietly. "So he's always with you. And maybe, when we get around to having a photograph taken, you could put one of us in the other side." Past and present both honored. Sarah threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I think I'm the lucky one," Isaac replied, holding her close. "You saved me as much as I saved you, Sarah. I was half alive before you came here, just going through the motions. You reminded me what it feels like to really live." On New Year's Eve, they bundled up against the cold and checked on the rose garden together. The bushes were buried under snow, but Isaac assured her they'd survive, protected by the mulch and their own hardy nature. Come spring, they'd wake up and grow strong. "Like us," Sarah said, leaning against his shoulder. "Like us," Isaac agreed. January and February dragged by slowly, the cold reluctant to release its grip. But finally, in March, the snow began to melt. Green shoots pushed up through the earth. The rose bushes, dormant all winter, began to show signs of life. Tiny red buds forming along their branches. By April, the roses were blooming, bright red and pink and yellow, filling the garden with color and sweet fragrance. Sarah tended them lovingly, remembering that day Isaac had found her with her wilted rose, how certain she'd been that nothing beautiful would ever touch her life again. How wrong she'd been. On a warm Saturday, in late April of 1883, Sarah and Isaac stood in that rose garden and spoke their vows. Rosa served as witness, along with 3 neighboring ranchers and their wives. Sarah wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, with roses from the garden in her hair. Isaac wore his best suit, the one he'd worn maybe twice in his whole life, looking uncomfortable but happy. The circuit preacher spoke the traditional words, and when he got to the part about objections, Rosa called out, "Anyone who objects can answer to me," which made everyone laugh. When Isaac slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, a simple gold band he'd bought in Salida, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't replacing what she'd had with James. It was something new, built on different foundations, but no less real or important. "I love you," she told Isaac as he kissed her and meant it with everything she was. "I love you too," he replied. "My wife." "My husband," she said, trying out the word. It felt strange at first, then right. They celebrated with a simple meal, stories and laughter filling the house. As the sun set, the guests departed, leaving Sarah and Isaac alone in the home that was truly theirs now together. That night, as they lay together for the first time as husband and wife, Sarah marveled at how much had changed in less than a year. She'd gone from wanting to die in the dust to lying in the arms of a man she loved, secure and safe and looking forward to the future. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Isaac asked sleepily, his arms around her. "For stopping. For asking if beauty could bloom again. for being patient while I figured out the answer." "The answer was always yes," Isaac said. "Just took time for you to see it." "I see it now," Sarah said. "I see it every day." Their first year of marriage was filled with the ordinary joys and challenges of ranch life. Sarah learned to help with more of the work, becoming confident with the horses, and even learning to assist with branding the calves, though the smell and noise bothered her. She kept the books for the ranch, her neat handwriting tracking expenses and profits, her good head for numbers helping them plan for the future. Isaac proved to be everything she could have wanted in a husband: steady, kind, hardworking, and affectionate. He never made her feel less important than the ranch work, always listened to her opinions, and thanked her for her contributions. They talked through disagreements rather than fighting, learning each other's patterns and preferences. Rosa continued to live with them, having become like a mother to Sarah and a second mother to Isaac. The three of them formed an unlikely but loving family. In the autumn of 1883, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but waited until she was sure before telling Isaac. She chose a quiet evening when they were alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky. "I have news," she said, taking his hand. "Good news or concerning news?" Isaac asked, turning to her with worry in his eyes. "Good news. At least I think it's good. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Isaac just stared at her. Then a grin spread across his face, bright and joyful. "Really? We're going to be parents?" "Yes, probably in the spring, around April or May." Isaac pulled her into his arms, careful but exuberant. "That's incredible. You're incredible. A baby, our baby." But then he pulled back, concern replacing joy. "Are you happy about this? I know with what happened to James and all you've been through." "I'm happy," Sarah assured him. "Scared too, but happy. This is a new beginning, Isaac, our child, our family. I never thought I'd get this chance again." "We'll take good care of you," Isaac promised. "Whatever you need. And Rosa will be thrilled. She's been dropping hints about grandbabies for months now." Rosa was indeed thrilled when they told her, immediately taking charge of preparations. She dug out baby clothes she'd kept from when Isaac and his sister were small, made plans for setting up a nursery, and started lecturing Sarah on proper nutrition and rest. Winter passed with Sarah growing rounder, her body changing in ways both strange and wonderful. Isaac was attentive and sweet, helping her with tasks that grew difficult, rubbing her aching back, talking to her belly about the ranch and all the things they'd teach their child. "What do you hope for?" Sarah asked him one snowy evening as they lay in bed. "Boy or girl?" "Healthy," Isaac said immediately. "That's all I care about. Healthy baby, safe delivery, you both coming through all right." "But if you could choose," he was quiet for a moment. "I don't care. Though maybe a boy first would be practical for ranch work, but a girl would be wonderful too. She could have your brains and beauty." "Or a boy could have those things too," Sarah pointed out. "Fair enough. Like I said, I just want healthy, and I want you safe. I couldn't bear to lose you, Sarah." She took his hand and placed it on her swollen belly. "You won't lose me. I'm strong and Rosa knows what she's doing. Everything will be fine." But as her due date approached, Sarah felt the same fear. Childbirth was dangerous, especially out here far from doctors. Women died, babies died. She tried not to think about it, but sometimes in the quiet moments, the fear crept in. Isaac seemed to sense her worry. "Whatever happens," he told her in early April, "know that you've given me more happiness in these 2 years than I thought possible. You brought me back to life, Sarah. You and this baby, you're everything to me." "Nothing's going to happen," Sarah said firmly, as much to convince herself as him. "In a few weeks we'll be holding our child and all this worry will seem silly." And she was right. On a warm day in late April 1884, After a long and difficult labor that had Isaac pacing holes in the floor and Rosa calmly directing Sarah through each contraction, their son was born. He came into the world squalling and red-faced, with dark hair like his father and a stubborn set to his tiny jaw. "He's perfect," Isaac said, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. "Sarah, he's perfect." Sarah, exhausted but elated, reached up to touch the baby's tiny hand. "What should we name him?" They'd discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Isaac said, "Thomas, after my father, if that's all right with you." "Thomas Xavier," Sarah said, trying it out. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and Sarah felt her heart expand to hold this new love. She'd been afraid she wouldn't have room, that loving another child might somehow diminish what she'd felt for James or for Isaac. But just like Rosa had said, heart stretched. Hers had room for all of it, the memory of her first husband, the love for her second, and now this overwhelming adoration for her son. Those first months of Thomas's life were exhausting and wonderful. Sarah had never been so tired or so happy. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, helping with night feedings, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. Rosa spoiled the baby shamelessly, knitting endless tiny clothes and singing Spanish lullabies. As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. Isaac's careful management and Sarah's good business sense helped them expand their herd and buy more land. They hired additional hands, built a bigger barn, improved the house. By the time Thomas was walking, the Xavier Ranch was one of the most successful in that part of Colorado. On Thomas's second birthday in April of 1886, Sarah found herself pregnant again. This time she knew the signs immediately and told Isaac that same evening. "Again," he said, delighted. "Another one. Thomas will have a sibling." "He will. Hope you're ready to be outnumbered," Sarah teased. This pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued working around the ranch, with Rosa and Isaac making sure she didn't overdo it. Thomas, now a curious and energetic toddler, kept everyone busy. Their second child, a daughter, was born in December of 1886. She came faster than Thomas had, arriving on a snowy morning with less fuss and drama. She had Sarah's gray eyes and a calm disposition that was immediately apparent. "Anna," Sarah said, looking at her daughter. "After my mother." "Anna Rose Xavier," Isaac added, nodding to the rose garden visible through the window, "for the flowers that brought us together." Little Anna proved to be the opposite of her brother in temperament. Where Thomas was loud and boisterous, Anna was quiet and observant. Where Thomas ran everywhere, Anna moved with careful deliberation. But they adored each other, Thomas immediately protective of his baby sister. Life settled into a new rhythm with two children. The house was never quiet, filled with laughter and crying and the constant motion of small people. Sarah sometimes marveled at how full her life had become. From that desperate woman in the dust, holding a dying rose, to this. A thriving ranch, a loving husband, two beautiful children, a found family in Rosa. "Are you happy?" Isaac asked her one evening as they stood together watching the sunset, a tradition they'd maintained since their early days together. The children were with Rosa, giving them a rare moment alone. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Sarah said honestly. "Sometimes I think about that day you found me, how certain I was that my life was over, how wrong I was." "Beauty bloomed again," Isaac said softly, "just like you asked." "It did, thanks to you." "Thanks to us both," Isaac corrected. "You did the hard work of healing, of opening yourself to possibilities. I just provided the space for it to happen." Sarah leaned against him, comfortable and content. "We make a good team." The best, Isaac agreed. Over the next years, they continued to build their life together. Thomas grew into a bright, adventurous boy who loved the ranch and shadowed his father everywhere. Anna was quieter but just as determined, showing early talent with horses and a gentle way with all animals. Rosa aged gracefully, slowing down a bit but still running the household with efficiency and love. In 1889, Sarah and Isaac welcomed a third child, another son they named William. He was a happy baby who rarely cried, content to watch the world with wide, curious eyes. Thomas, now 5, took his role as big brother seriously, while 3-year-old Anna mothered the baby with fierce devotion. The ranch continued to grow. They now employed 6 full-time hands and seasonal workers during Roundup. The house had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family. The rose garden had spread, becoming a showpiece that Sarah tended lovingly, always remembering what those flowers represented. On their 10th wedding anniversary in April of 1893, Isaac had a surprise for Sarah. He'd hired a photographer to come to the ranch, a rare luxury. They dressed in their finest clothes and posed for a family portrait. Isaac and Sarah seated with baby William on Sarah's lap, Thomas and Anna standing beside them, Rosa included at Sarah's insistence. For the locket, Isaac explained after, presenting Sarah with a small package. Inside was a tiny version of the photograph, perfectly sized for the locket he'd given her all those years ago. Now you have both sides filled, past and present. Sarah opened the locket, looking at James's picture on one side, young and hopeful, and the new family photograph on the other. It felt right, both lives honored, both loves remembered. Thank you, she said, kissing Isaac, for understanding, for never being jealous of what came before. How could I be jealous? Isaac said. Everything you went through, everyone you loved made you who you are, made you the woman I love. I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because they brought you to me. That summer, Sarah received word that one of her cousins back in St. Louis had died, leaving Sarah a small inheritance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. After discussing it with Isaac, they decided to use the money to help establish a school in Salida for the ranching family's children. It was something the community desperately needed, and Sarah wanted to give back to the place that had become her home. The school opened in the fall of 1893, a simple building but sturdy and bright, with a teacher brought in from Denver. Thomas started attending that year, riding into town 3 times a week with several other ranch children. He loved learning, his quick mind soaking up everything the teacher could provide. As the children grew, the ranch evolved. Thomas showed real talent for working cattle and managing the hands, already thinking ahead to when he'd take over the operation. Anna had her mother's head for numbers and her father's love of horses, spending hours training the young stock. William, still small, was everyone's darling, sweet-natured and affectionate. Rosa's health began to decline in 1895. She'd never been sick a day in Sarah's memory, but that winter she caught a cold that turned into pneumonia. For weeks, Sarah and Isaac took turns nursing her, worried they might lose the woman who'd become so essential to their family. But Rosa was tough. She pulled through, though she never fully regained her strength. She could no longer do the heavy work she'd once managed, but she supervised from a rocking chair, still the heart of the household. The children adored her, gathering around her chair to hear stories of the old days or learn the Spanish songs she'd sung to Isaac when he was small. In the summer of 1896, Rosa sat Sarah down for a serious conversation. "I need to talk to you about practical things," she said. "I'm not going to live forever, and I want to make sure you know what I want." "Don't talk like that," Sarah protested. "You've got years left. Maybe. But I'm 73, child. I've lived a good long time. And I want to be buried next to my husband. In the plot, Isaac set aside for me by the big oak tree. I want you to have my recipes, all written down proper. And I want you to know that these past years with you and Isaac and the children, they've been the happiest of my life. Sarah held the older woman's hand, tears in her eyes. You saved me, Rosa. That first night, the way you cared for me without judgment, the wisdom you shared, I wouldn't be who I am without you. We saved each other, Rosa said. I was lonely after Isaac's sister died. This house was too empty. You brought life back into it, filled it with love and children and laughter. That's a gift, Sarah. Don't forget it. Rosa lived another 2 years, long enough to see Thomas turn 14 and start taking on real responsibility for the ranch, long enough to see Anna at 12 showing talent for painting and drawing alongside her other skills, long enough to hold 5-year-old William and tell him stories until he fell asleep in her lap. She passed peacefully in her sleep in October of 1898, exactly as she would have wanted. They buried her under the oak tree as requested, with a simple stone marker. The whole community turned out for the funeral, testament to how many lives she'd touched. Sarah grieved deeply, but found comfort in her family and in the knowledge that Rosa had died content, surrounded by people who loved her. The house felt emptier without her presence, but her influence remained in every room, every recipe, every bit of wisdom she'd shared over the years. Life continued, as it always did. Thomas grew into a responsible young man, taking over more of the ranch operations as Isaac began to slow down a bit in his mid-40s. Anna's artwork became increasingly skilled, and she began selling pieces to people in town, earning her own money while still helping with the horses. William showed signs of being the scholar of the family, always reading, curious about everything. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Sarah found herself reflecting on the incredible journey her life had taken. She was 42 years old, married for 17 years to a man she loved deeply, mother to 3 thriving children, co-owner of a successful ranch. The terrified widow holding a wilted rose seemed like a different person entirely, but she hadn't forgotten. She still had the locket with both photographs. She still tended the rose garden, now sprawling and magnificent. She still remembered the question she'd asked Isaac that first day. Beauty can bloom again, right? The answer, lived out over nearly 2 decades, was a resounding yes. On a warm April evening in 1900, Sarah and Isaac stood in the rose garden together, as they'd done countless times over the years. The roses were in full bloom, filling the air with their sweet scent. From the house came the sound of their children laughing, William calling for his mother, Anna singing as she painted on the porch. 18 years, Isaac said, slipping his arm around Sarah's waist. Since I found you out by that creek, seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I was so certain everything was over, Sarah said, so sure nothing good would ever touch my life again. And now? Sarah smiled, looking at the roses, the thriving garden, the warm light spilling from the house windows, hearing her children's voices. Now I know better. Beauty doesn't just bloom again. It spreads. It grows. It fills spaces you didn't even know were empty. Isaac kissed her forehead. I love you, Sarah Xavier. I love you too, Isaac. Thank you for teaching me that hope wasn't foolish, that love could happen twice, that wilted roses could become gardens. They stood there together as the sun set. 2 people who'd both known loss and loneliness, who'd found each other at exactly the right moment, who'd built something beautiful from ashes and dust. Around them, the roses bloomed in profusion, alive and vibrant, proof that with patience and care and love, beauty could always bloom again. Thomas would eventually take over the ranch, marrying a smart young woman from Salida and giving Sarah and Isaac their first grandchildren. Anna would continue her art, becoming known throughout Colorado for her paintings of ranch life and mountain landscapes, while also managing the ranch's breeding program for horses. William would go to college in Denver, becoming a teacher and returning to run the school Sarah had helped establish, bringing education to another generation of ranch children. But all of that was still to come. For now, on this perfect April evening, Sarah and Isaac stood together in their garden, surrounded by roses and love and the life they'd built together. The wilted rose from that desperate day so long ago was pressed in Sarah's Bible, a reminder of where she'd been. But the garden around her showed where she'd arrived, a place of beauty and growth, of second chances and enduring love. The answer to her question had been proven beyond doubt, written in roses and children's laughter and the steady love of a good man. Beauty could bloom again. It already had. It would continue to bloom for generations to come, seeded by two people who'd refused to give up on hope even when hope seemed foolish. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Isaac and Sarah walked hand in hand back to the house, to their children and their life together. Behind them, the roses nodded in the evening breeze, alive and thriving, a garden grown from faith and watered with love, blooming again and again and again, season after season, year after year, beautiful and enduring and very much alive.